Welcome to another of our breakout sessions of today's ILOC conference, Iowa Libraries Online Conference, and we're delighted that you're here. And this session, as you can see from the title, is about quick picks. This is a catchy name that the Ames Public Library has for a special collection of books that has helped to decrease the wait time on holds and allows patrons to quickly grab their favorite book and feel like they really got a good win for that day. Kathy Cooney is our presenter. She is the Adult Services Librarian at Ames, and I am just going to hand it off to you and not take up any more of your time, Kathy.
That sounds great. Thanks, Marianne. So I imagine that all of you being from Iowa know a little bit about Ames, but just to give you some quick stats to start us off, Ames is in central Iowa, the home of Iowa State University, and being a university town allows us many unique opportunities. Our bookmobile, for example, regularly visits campus and often has some quick picks on it. And we are housed in one building plus the bookmobile, and we serve a population of 66,000, with about half of that number being Iowa State students. Our annual circulation last year was around 950,000 items, and in a pre-COVID year, it was about 1.2 million. So I think we all have those pre-COVID year and COVID year stats. So why did we decide to develop this collection that's different from the rest of our collection? The most important reason is access. So holds-based circulation is phenomenal, but it really benefits people who have access to the internet or even to a phone, who can put themselves on the holds list for an item, or who can call in and ask us to put them on hold for an item. But what about folks who don't have internet access or don't have a phone, and really in-person interaction in the library is their main way of getting materials? This collection helps them get those items. It also helps folks who don't have as much technical knowledge, or those who don't have the means of being notified when a held item is available for them. I'm thinking of one customer we had who didn't have an email address or a phone number, so needed to wait for his mail to arrive in order to be notified that he had a hold. We also do not charge a fee for access. I know there are some libraries who do for this type of collection, and we are a fine-free library, so this kind of ties into that part of the accessibility picture as well. We also started to notice that after a book's holds list had kind of wound down, it wasn't as popular anymore. We had so many extra copies. The example I think of the most was Michelle Obama's Becoming. At one point, we had 52 copies of that on the shelf, as holds lists weren't still long, but the copies were things that we owned that were just sitting there waiting for us to do something with them. So that was more staff time and weeding time that we needed to put into that. The wait list for customers were long, and we have a good system of purchasing a copy for every X number of holds on an item, but it can be intimidating when you're a customer and you see that you're number 60 something for a new popular book. You think, oh, I'll never get that, no matter how many copies the library has. And we also wanted to encourage customers to browse our collection. So we have a lot of folks who place holds and they just buzz right in the front door, grab their holds, and head back out, which there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. But we wanted to encourage people to spend a little bit of time with our collection, to make their way upstairs to the second floor, which is where our adult services staff are and where our adult materials are, as well as our public computers. And so we wanted to encourage them to come upstairs to see us, maybe to take a few minutes to browse and see what new exciting reads they might be able to discover. It also shows the depth of our collection. When the new popular book, like Where the Crawdads Sing, for example, comes out and people come in and ask for it and it's not on the shelf and it says it's not available, you get that reaction sometimes of, well, why didn't you buy this? But we did, you just don't see it on the shelf because of the holds list. So having a collection like our Quick Pick collection allows us to have these items on the shelf. We did buy them, they are part of our collection, and you do have a chance of being able to check it out without waiting on hold forever. So we originally were planning to roll this collection out in spring of 2020, which understandably had some complications. But we did, and I will show you some data later about how the collection has thrived during the pandemic. So the very first challenge was collection rules. How do we work with our circulation staff, or we call them customer accounts, and how do we keep our customers from feeling cheated that there's this other option out there? So we didn't want customers who were waiting on the holds list to feel like there were others cutting in front of them in line and getting, this extra perk that they weren't getting. But we also really wanted to offer this collection. So we came up with a list of kind of rules to apply to the Quick Pick collection to make it a little bit more, to indicate more that this is a special collection. So you cannot put items on hold that are Quick Picks. You cannot renew them. Checking out a Quick Pick copy removes you from the holds list for the regular copy. The idea there being that you have had access to a copy and you can always put yourself back on hold if you want to, but this decreases the wait time for the folks who are behind you in line since you have got a copy in your hands. We also limited it to 2 Quick Pick books and 2 Quick Pick media items at a time. Right now we offer both DVDs and Blu-rays, which is not the part I select for, so I'm not going to talk a ton about it, but I'm happy to refer any questions that you might have to my colleague if I can't answer them. And we also limited our checkout of the Quick Pick items to 1 week instead of the usual 3 weeks. So really geared toward those folks who come in, they browse, they want it now, they want to read it now and get it done and be able to talk about it with their friends without waiting on hold. So the next challenge, and I should mention the image on that slide is a picture of the label that we put on these books, which I'll talk about in more detail later. But it has the basic rules of Quick Picks on it, so that it's easy to remember what makes this different than a regular book and to see that you have the Quick Pick copy in front of you with the big yellow sticker. All right, so next challenge. Do you lease or do you purchase? Or do you not lease, I guess, if I want to stick with my slide title. So we research leasing options through both Baker & Taylor and Ingram, which are the 2 major vendors that we use for our print materials. And we ultimately decided that for the quantity of items that we needed, purchasing was the right fit for us. There wasn't a significant monetary savings, at least for our library, in purchasing the books ourselves versus leasing them. And we were also a little hesitant to lease because of the staff time that would be required to weed and return them in line with the terms of the leasing agreement. So for example, Baker & Taylor allows libraries to keep a certain percentage of the leased titles, but they need to return the rest of them. And so we worried about the staff time trying to fill those quotas of what we can keep, what we can get rid of, and making sure that we were staying on top of like the number of titles we should have in the library and all of that. We also wanted to be able to use our withdrawn copies. So we have a used bookstore downstairs that is run by our Friends Foundation, and the image on your screen is a picture of a display cube that is down in that bookstore. It's called Literary Grounds, and it's a great way for folks to get their hands on books and for us to raise money for our friends. So on this display cube is new hardcover fiction, and 19 of the titles on that cube are former Quick Pick books. So our volunteers take all of the labels and all of the library markings off that they can, and we're able to resell those books for about $3 each. And for things that have a 2022 pub date, they're going to be $4 each. So we're making a significant profit for our Friends Foundation through the bookstore with these copies. And we figured that was a pretty good trade-off and decided to stick with purchasing. So the next question, funding. So we decided that we needed a collection of items to stay on the shelf at the beginning so that we had a good selection for folks to choose from rather than just having them trickle in. And to get started, we thought, well, 2,500 seems like a good number of titles. If we get, say, X, I think we were thinking at that point, maybe 5 items per title and kind of mathing that out. And because I select the print material Quick Picks, and I also select adult fiction, we were able to carve, $100 here, $100 there out of my other fiction budget lines in order to create that seed funding. So it really only impacted me and didn't impact any of the other folks on our selectors team, at least to get started. And in the next year, we were funded probably the Friends Foundation. So they've budgeted about $6,000 for us this fiscal year, which runs for us from July to June. And I've only spent about $2,000 so far, so doing pretty well on keeping under budget there. So now comes the infamous sticker slide. We're going to talk about marketing. So we worried about how customers would know that it was a quick pick and not a part of our regular collection. So especially because we were planning to display them near our new books, since most, if not all, of the quick pick books would typically fall into that new book category. So as you can see in the image, in addition to having a shelf location in Polaris that is either quick picks or quick pick, I think it's quick pick DVDs, just to help tell them apart, they have these labeling systems. So the image on the left, I've chosen the same book, and you can see a copy on our new shelf with the small yellow sticker, and then a copy from the quick pick shelf with the much larger yellow label that says the rules of the quick picks collection. And in the image on the right, you can see we also put a small quick picks spine label. So just in case something were to have its shelf location misread or accidentally changed, when folks see it on the shelf, they see that quick picks spine label and know that that book is not where it needs to be. So additional marketing, we had to figure out where we would put them and what we would call it. So this image is the entrance of our second floor collections area. So right when you come up our main staircase or get off of the elevator on the second floor, this is the view that you see. And over on the right, all of those rows are our new fiction and nonfiction. And then that shelving unit directly ahead of you has the quick picks face out and then spine out, and then our other new collections, audio, graphic novels, and large print. So all of the new things that we think people really want quickly are going to be up there. So even though I said earlier that we were creating this in part to encourage people to come upstairs and browse, we still put it right at the beginning of our collection in a very visual place so that people who are in a rush can still access those items or quickly see which ones are on the shelf and available if they need to rush off somewhere else. So we put them in their own little section. They've got their big stickers. We then had to come up with the name, which, believe it or not, was one of the hardest things for us. So we bounced around between Lucky Day for a while. We called it Jackpot for a while. One of my coworkers came from a library that called it Bestseller Express. And we knew that we wanted something that wasn't book specific because we knew that we wanted to include media at some point. So we went with quick picks. Nice, short, catchy, encapsulates what it is. And from there, we're able to design our marketing, and our fantastic marketing team did a lot of pushing on our website and our social media, both Instagram and Facebook. And we even talked it up on YouTube, especially when we were doing primarily like video engagement during earlier phases of the pandemic. So next question. How do you select? With the whole wide world of materials out there, how do you decide what to buy for quick picks? So I started with that seed collection that I mentioned. It was about 80 items in total, about 16 different titles. I think we did 4 copies each at the beginning, just a flat 4 copies no matter what the book was. And they were basically the same titles that I would normally choose for the collection, just with a few extra wild cards thrown in. I also chat routinely with our young adult or teen librarian about books that are coming out for that age group that might be a really good fit for us. So we had, for example, the newest Hunger Games book, Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. We had the newest Twilight book. We had several Sarah J. Maas titles, all of those kinds of things. So I decided for myself to kind of pare down the amount of items I would need to decide on. I have, as I'm ordering throughout the month, I have a quick pick question mark cart that I'm adding titles to that I think have potential. And I also look at Baker & Taylor's leasing lists, which is the image you see in the middle of your screen. If you haven't used them before, they're under Browse and Selection Lists and Adult. And then down at the bottom, you'll see Book Leasing. They put out a fiction and a nonfiction for each month. And so that gives you kind of a more limited number of titles, usually less than 100 on each list, to flip through and look at to make sure that you're capturing the biggest bestsellers, but also without starting completely over from scratch. I also run holds reports in our ILS to see what has the highest number of holds so that I can put things on there that people want and hopefully get them into their hands faster. And usually that's titles that have over 15 holds. One of the most popular was The Last Thing He Told Me by Laura Dave. And that one's still circulating strong. And then in terms of the number of copies of each book, we started with a flat like 4 to 5, thinking, oh, we'll see these really high demand titles. We'll certainly check out super fast. People will want lots and lots of copies of them. And it turned out that that wasn't really necessary. So right now I usually choose between 1 and 3 copies of each book, depending on how popular I think it's going to be, or how popular previous titles by that author were in the collection. So, for example, Cloud Cuckoo Land by Anthony Doerr has been wildly popular. Apples Never Fall by Leanne Moriarty I haven't been able to keep on the shelf. And so those are ones I'd order more copies of, whereas like in this image you see a Mitch Albom book. I think that's the only one I bought for quick picks. And it goes out, but it's not as hot an item as some of the others. That's another name we thought of was Hot Takes, but thought that might be misconstrued. All right, so how do we decide what to weed? So this image is completely unrelated, but I thought, well, it still has to do with quick picks. This is an image from when we were in the lobby phase earlier in the pandemic. We had our quick pick books on the cube in the background and our media on the cube in the foreground. And this was a promotional video that we did explaining how people could still access these materials even though the library wasn't fully open. We still had these collections where they could do a little bit of browsing and get these popular items. So how do I decide what to weed? Honestly, at the beginning, I started doing a lot with kind of circ stats and all of those kinds of different metrics, trying to figure out what made sense. But honestly, I found that just observational weeding is the best fit for me. It's a place that I walk by multiple times a day, and I can look and see what books seem to be sticking around, what books seem to have all of their copies sticking around, versus which books I never see on the shelf. Like I never see The Lincoln Highway or Cloud Cuckoo Land out there. So I know they're still circulating out there somewhere. And I usually get rid of a few copies at a time for those that I have multiples of, just so we can kind of winnow it down a little bit rather than getting rid of it entirely, especially because often there's still a copy or two that's checked out. If I really need to make space, as many of you would do, I start by pulling the copies that were published the earliest. Right now, I've got quite a spread out there with things that were published late spring, early summer last year, but they're still circulating like mad. So I leave them out there because people want them. And that's totally fine. Because sometimes they surprise you. I always check circulation before I withdraw, because even though every day I might see a copy of the David Baldacci book out there, it could be a different copy. Someone's checking it out, someone else is returning, and it's getting shelved. And I've been surprised several times when I've gone to withdraw things by, oh, this just came back. These are still circulating. I also compare it to the regular collection to see how the holds list is doing. If we've reached a point that we have multiple copies on the regular shelf, we don't still really need them as a quick pick, because why would you check it out for 1 week with no renewals when you could check it out for 3 weeks and renew it? So, and we also just kind of keep an eye on that difference. So sometimes books surprise me. Last year was looking at Britt Bennett's The Vanishing Half. I knew it was going to be a popular book. And it had so many holds on it. So we had so many copies on the shelf. but there were almost always quick pick copies available. So folks were not checking out the quick picks. They were putting themselves on hold and waiting for the regular copy. So I ended up taking about half of the quick pick copies and converting them to the regular collection to help make the holds list move faster. So sometimes, I know this will not come as a surprise, the public doesn't behave the way you think they're going to. So scalability. Just, you don't have to be a library the size of Ames to have this kind of collection. You can be bigger or smaller. It's really easy once you have the general guidelines that you want to use, like no renewals, 2 items, etc., to make this collection be any size that you need it to be. This is a picture from last week of what we have out on the shelf right now. You'll see Blu-rays and DVDs, top shelves, books, the bottom shelves, and I'd say that's probably about 40 titles maybe out there. But if you're in a smaller library, start with maybe 5 books that are by the authors that are most popular where you are, and go from there. See if it takes off, if it's something that your community is looking for. The thing that I would advocate is to make sure that you have enough copies that there are always a couple of choices on the shelf, just because I think it could be very discouraging for a customer to come in hoping to browse quick picks. They never see any on the shelf. They think, oh, I'm never going to get one of those. What's the point? Whereas if you have at least a couple things, even if they're things they're not interested in, they can see that there's that possibility that they'll be able to snag one of the subsequent times that they come into the library. So I wanted to share a few anecdotes with you from our staff about our quick picks, which I'm going to read as well as having typed out on the screen. So last week, I had a customer drive all the way from Marshalltown for the newest season of Star Trek Discovery that we had on Quick Picks. And he was thrilled when it was still there when he made it all the way into Ames. When I first put Colson Whitehead's Harlem Shuffle out there, we had someone come in and say, I was just listening to this author on NPR and I couldn't believe the book was here. It feels like a present to not have to wait. And that's the whole point, right? That they don't have to wait in line. They can access this book that they're so excited about right now while it's in the forefront of their minds. Our circulation or customer accounts staff routinely say that as people walk away from the desk with a quick pick, they gleefully tell them what their previous spot in the holds queue was. And, I was number 36, and now I have it in my hand and can go home and read it tonight. So they also say there are lots of people who come in and are shocked to find a copy on the shelf, or specifically to get one that they saw was available on Quick Picks. I routinely have people come up to the desk and say, I don't know what Quick Picks are, but it says you have a copy of this book over there. Can you show me? And absolutely, I can show you. So it's so exciting that we have people coming in specifically for this collection. One of my favorite stories is this customer who saw there was a copy of The Rose Code by Kate Quinn, which would have been a 6-week wait at the time, and said she would come back for Quick Picks because it's a gold mine up here. And she left with her max of 2 and was very pleased. She also said that her daughters are big readers and she saw lots of titles that they had been talking about in our Quick Picks collection. So that was really exciting and kind of affirming to know that the titles that I've been choosing are titles that people are interested in and talking about and all of that. Now, that's not to say everything is always sunshine and roses. There are some challenges, although I have to say not as many as I was anticipating. So one of the challenges especially faced by our customer account staff is helping customers understand equal access to make sure that everyone has access to popular titles. They can't just bring their quick pick in and immediately check it out because no one has it on hold. That's not the point. It needs to be available for folks to browse for a little bit if we don't have another copy on the shelf or another copy in Quick Picks that they could get. So there are some conversations like that. We also have moments where it's waiting to be shelved. It's still in the back, so it's not that quick a pick because we have to run to the back and get it, or it's not showing up on the shelf. And hopefully those folks are always coming and engaging with us to make sure that they're getting the book that they're intending to get. But, you don't know what folks aren't asking. I also had this fear that someone would come in, like the gentleman who drove in from Marshalltown, for that specific season of Star Trek if someone had come by and snatched it up and checked it out before he was able to make it to Ames. And I have never heard about that happening to someone with a quick pick. It's just something that I've been worrying about. But given that we've had it now for about 2 years and no one's ever brought that up that I'm aware of, seems pretty good. So I also want to take a minute and talk to you about data. So I have a couple of lovely graphs that will make more sense shortly. The graph in the top right is the turnover rate of our Quick Pick print collection. This is only print. This is not the DVDs and Blu-rays. And then the graph on the left, the blue line is our circulation of the Quick Pick collection, and the orange line is the number of items in the Quick Pick collection. So it's a little wacky because of the pandemic. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of context about what our library looked like at the different points in these graphs to help it make a little bit more sense. So from March to June 2020, we were fully closed and the only circulation was staff and volunteers. So right at the beginning of the collection, really low circulation. And then July and August 2020, we started doing curbside, the first iteration of curbside, where Quick Picks were a little harder to access because they're not holdable, and we were bringing out holds for curbside. So there were exceptions where someone asked about a particular book and we were able to get it to them, but it still was slow at that point. It really took off in that like August to November range when we had lobby service open, and Quick Picks were one of the few collections that were available for folks to browse. And then you'll see that steep plummet when we had to go back to curbside, and there's hardly any circulation from November to January. But then back to lobby service, you see that steep upswing in circulation, and then a peak in March when we reopened the second floor of the building to the public and full building access. So there's been a slight decrease from that point, but they're still going strong and still checking out. And I think we've come up with a good balance of number of items to usage. So the numbers have fluctuated with how many things are being published that our patrons would be interested in. For a while, we were averaging in the mid 100s in terms of number of items in the Quick Pick collection. Now I think we're in the 80s or 90s. I'd say there are about 30 to 50 on the shelf at any given time, probably closer to 40 right now. For the most part, the turnover rate for the books averages in the mid 20s, which I'm pretty happy with. And last spring, they were averaging between 250 and 350 checkouts per month. Last month was about 170 for the 83 titles that we have. So I'm still pretty happy with that. Everything seems to be circulating really well, even if it's not quite as high as it was this time last year. So good times with graphs. So the unexpected, I think many of you will recognize James Patterson up there in the top right-hand corner. And if you don't, I just identified him for you. I'm always surprised at what circulates and what doesn't. I have tried putting James Patterson books on Quick Picks and they don't check out. Our readers who read James Patterson just like being on the holds list and picking it up when it's ready for them. They aren't coming in and looking at Quick Picks. So I have tried at least 3 or 4 times and nope, nobody wants them. Super literary books like the latest Jonathan Franzen, the latest Lauren Groff have super high holds lists, but they're not checking out off the Quick Pick shelf. So I'm still finding my feet. Romances don't do super well either. The Denise Williams romance novel, since she's a local author, and we did a program with her, that one's been checking out super well, but I put the new Helen Hong on there and not so much. So it's just a little hit or miss as we figure out which users use this collection and which users prefer to use our other collections. We were also anticipating that books in this collection would have a high level of wear and tear, which is one of the reasons that we were looking at leasing to begin with. But actually, at the end of their Quick Pick run, most of these items are in the same or better shape than their counterparts in the regular collection. I'm not sure exactly why that is. If it's that they aren't getting carried around as much or what, but for the most part, they there are very few that have spills or tears or water damage, and we're able to sell them all in the used bookstore, which is great. One of the things that we found, which is the other image on your screen, is that the way that we cataloged them can be a little challenging for customers to search. So they have to go into our additional search features and then choose quick picks under collections, or choose quick pick movies if that's what they're interested in, rather than being able to just search the phrase quick picks or something like that. We decided that this was okay with us. If folks ask, we can show them how to do this search. But since the reason for creating the collection was to prioritize users who are coming into the building and browsing the collection, or who want a specific title and are thrilled to find it there serendipitously, we felt that that was an okay trade, and we didn't want to do the extra cataloging to make them super easily searchable. We also continuously talk about the location of the collection. We've had comment cards from customers who really liked having them downstairs during the lobby phase. And I think for sure that would be much more convenient for folks who just come in and grab items off the hold shelf. But it really does encourage browsing to have the materials upstairs. And it also decreases the congestion because we have a limited amount of real estate in our lobby, and it's already full of many other things that are useful for our circulation staff, our used bookstore, our volunteers. So, and it also made sense to us to have the quick pick versions upstairs because they're near the new book copies. So if you're looking for it on the new shelf, maybe you'll look and see that it's available as a quick pick and check that out from there. So there's always more to think about. There's always somewhere else we can go from here. And so I don't have concrete statistical evidence proving that it decreased wait time, but hopefully with the different things that we've put in place to remove folks from the holds list when they check out a quick pick and to make these other copies available, it has. We're hoping to collect more data over the next year and have a more concrete answer. So the next question, which I think I should have flipped my bullet points, is that at one point Overdrive had a lucky day feature that you could use for ebooks. And with the sunsetting of the Overdrive app, we need to investigate if that's available in Libby and figure out if offering a similar collection for ebooks is something that we are willing and able to do. And if it's worth the effort to do that, that's what the is it worth it bullet point should go toward. One of the other things that I often think about with this collection is collection diversity. We try very hard to incorporate a bunch of materials from different authors, different experiences, different perspectives on all of our displays, in all of our book lists, in all of our lists of recommendations and newspaper articles and everything else. This collection, because it is so heavily based on holds lists and anticipated popularity, tends to look a little bit more homogenous than that. So I try to incorporate some different perspectives and lived experiences whenever I can, but it's not as diverse as I would like it to be. And that's something that I intend to continue looking at moving forward. So that in general is Ames Public Library's Quick Pick collection. I realize I'm a little bit ahead of time, but I am happy to answer any questions anyone might have.
Your timing is just about perfect, Kathy.
Yay!
So we do have a few questions, and I have kept track of them. So we'll start with the first one, which is, I don't know how much time you want to spend on this one, because this is more about your processes with your used bookstore than it is about the quick picks.
Sure.
But the question is, how do you address the issue of giving weeded books purchased with municipal funds to your friend's foundation for resale? I'm going to assume that your library has a process in place where maybe your friends buy the books at a minimal amount, or
I believe that's right. I would have to refer the question to one of our volunteer coordinator, who would be able to speak to it much more knowledgeably. I believe that's the case. They have some kind of agreement where the friends purchase the books for a nominal cost, but I can certainly refer that question along if folks want to shoot me an email, or if you're able to get the contact information, Marianne.
And the next question is, do you shelve the teen quick picks with teen items or in that general quick picks area?
Sure, that's a great question. So since they've moved back upstairs, we have not had, I don't think, any young adult. We do in the movies have several juvenile, or if we call them family movies, and we do shelve them upstairs. So all the quick picks stay together regardless of age range. We thought that would be less confusing since folks are looking for the quick pick collection. But next time that comes up, I plan to talk to our teen librarian about some marketing that we can do so that folks who are browsing the teen collection looking for these popular titles can identify that there might be additional copies upstairs.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody asks, how do you handle patrons who return beyond that 7-day loan period since you're a fine-free library?
I have not heard a lot about it coming up. I believe we handle it kind of the same way that we handle any overdues, which is just, we would love to have them return it on time. But yeah, but we do get more items, just like I'm sure many of you have heard statistically, the return rate in general is better with fine free because folks aren't worried about having to pay that when they do finally return the item.
I was in a library that had it's funny you mentioned this exact name, Bestseller Express. That's what we called it at this library. And that we really did not have a problem with overdues from that collection because I think the people who read those books just devour them very quickly. And the fact that you have a limit on only 2 from that particular collection, people want to read it, get it back so they can grab the next one. So
absolutely. And I will say it is rare for me to have one come up lost. Like it's sometimes I'll get one that's damaged, but hardly ever one that's lost.
And this is one of my questions. I might have missed because I had another thing that I had to take care of. But did you mention kind of how many numbers of titles or how many copies of a title you get? I know you mentioned you had 52 titles at one point in time of Michelle Obama's book.
Oh my gosh, right?
And so how does that compare now with how many quick picks of a title do you purchase?
I have noticed a lot, like as I'm just wandering through the collection, I'm not noticing like 15, 20 copies of a lot of these books. So I think, again, I don't have firm statistics, but I do have this anecdotal evidence of I'm not seeing piles and piles and piles of the same title. Like I think at one point we even had 14 copies of Ghost at a Watchman, which I know is an older example now, but it bothered me for a long time. And so now I think we're doing a much better job of not kind of having them rack up on the regular shelf. And yeah, it seems to be helping. I'm looking forward to seeing kind of in a more normal year how everything shakes out.
You mentioned that books that you would normally think that would just be a good item for a grab and go kind of collection don't circulate as well, like your romance, you said, and James Patterson. I'm wondering, do you think that's because the people who put holds on those books are the people that I'm guilty of this? I go in the library, pick up my hold and leave. You mentioned those kinds of patrons early, but do you think that's one of the reasons that they're not getting upstairs and seeing that those titles are available? Or I don't know.
I think it could be. I think part of it could also be that some of those folks, I'm sure many other libraries have this too. We have customers who routinely will just call us with a whole laundry list of books that they want to have put on hold for them. And I don't think they ever actually look in the catalog. So since they're wanting to place holds, they don't ever see that we have this as an option. Or it's possible that when it was downstairs in the lobby, folks who read those authors were less likely to come out with the pandemic happening. And so they just didn't see the collection. I don't know. It's just really interesting what goes and what doesn't, because it's constantly surprising.
Someone says evidently she uses your library and she loves the quick pick section. And she says it's great for fiction titles, but she doesn't find that 1 week is always enough time to get through a new fiction title because it does take longer to get through a nonfiction title than a fiction title just because of the content. It's heavier reading. You can't just skim through it really quickly. Have you noticed that, or do you end up with many nonfiction titles on your quick picks selection?
We don't tend to have a ton. We had the new Eric Larson right at the beginning when that one came out. We've had like some Bob Woodward. We had when Mary Trump's book came out, or like Barack Obama's biography. We have the new Mary Roach out there right now. And we have Amanda Gorman's poetry out there right now as well. And they don't seem to circulate as much. I don't know if that's because 1 week isn't enough to get through them, or the nonfiction readers just don't gravitate toward quick picks. I think it would be really interesting to kind of figure out a way to survey quick pick readers to see kind of what they think of the collection. I'm literally just thinking of that idea right now, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I think that's definitely powerful feedback. And I know we just extended the checkout time for our like TV series and I think our nonfiction DVDs as well. So this might be a good time to kind of have those conversations.
That brings up another question. Your DVD collection of quick picks,
Yes.
do they also have a 1 week time period, or is it shorter? Okay.
All of the regulations and limits are the same before the media and the books. You can just have 2 of each.
And your normal cert period is how long?
For TV series and nonfiction, it is 3 weeks. For everything else, it is 1 week. So the quick picks have the same checkout length as our normal materials for most of the Blu-ray and DVDs.
Okay. And what about for books? How long do your non-quick pick titles circ?
They circ for 3 weeks.
3 weeks. Okay.
Yeah. The book collection came before the media collection, but they, I think, only by a month or two. They all it all happened quite fast.
This is a customer service issue. And I know from having dealt with a Bestseller Express kind of collection, people will see that you've got it on the shelf in the quick picks. They see that in the catalog. And I'm going to use your Marshalltown customer as an example. I'm coming over right now. It's going to take me X amount of minutes to get there. Can you just make sure it's going to be there when I get there? How do you handle that?
I had that conversation with that customer and he was very understanding, but I just told him it is on the shelf right now. I can't set it aside for you behind the desk. I can't put it on hold for you. But I would say, when you're getting ready to leave, give us a call, see if it's still there, check online, see if it's still there. And, if it happens to walk away, maybe you can find something else that you really love, or we can recommend something. But as it happened, it was still there and he was delighted. And I was delighted that it was still there. Yeah. So it's not an easy...
You haven't had to deal with anybody who has driven and it's not there and then they get angry?
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet. I don't know how that's possible. But
yeah, in 2 years with no complaints about that. That's pretty good track record.
At least none that have made it back to me. I don't work the customer accounts desk, so I can't say if they have, but none have. They are very good about passing up feedback. So I assume I would have heard about it, but not yet.
Okay, so you said that you kind of make predictions about putting things at least tentatively in a cart. What's in your tentative that
that's a good
next
question.
Good quick pick?
That is a good question. I think right now most of what I have in my cart is what you would expect. A lot of kind of big name authors and things that have been super popular here. Like I knew the Lincoln Highway was going to be popular both because of the Lincoln Highway tie-in and because Gentleman in Moscow has been wildly popular for the whole time it's been published. I don't have any at the moment that are jumping out like with Crawdads. I kind of could feel that one coming. I don't know, librarian spidey senses maybe. I think a lot of people felt that. I don't think I have any sitting there right now that are like that though. I am sitting on a Jonas Brothers biography that the pub date keeps getting pushed back on. And I've never listened to the Jonas Brothers, but I have a feeling that one might be popular. So, and I'd have a couple debut authors, some good mysteries and things up there, and always looking out for that local author connection too, because I know those, especially if we do programs, will be popular.
I don't recall if you said, do you have any children's titles?
Not at the moment.
Like Diary of a Wimpy Kid, how wildly popular that was. Would you consider putting a children's title?
Maybe. I need to go chat with our youth department because I know that we have children's films or family films. And I don't know, because I think we talked at one point about whether it made sense to have like a youth quick pick collection in that space and have an adult quick pick collection in that space. And we'd also talked about housing it somewhere that was more equidistant between the two. But I think it's a good time to kind of reopen that discussion, because I think if we were to do something like Diary of a Wimpy Kid, where kids would be so excited to see it right there, I wouldn't want to make them come all the way upstairs for that. There's nothing else that they would want up here,
Right.
So I think that's definitely a good conversation to keep having. The sky's the limit though, right? You can make it whatever you want.